Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a pretty radical idea. What if the very words we use every single day, the basic structure of our language, are actually holding us back, creating conflict, and maybe even driving us all a little bit insane?
So, let's just kick things off with a pretty provocative question. This was posed nearly a century ago by a thinker who was convinced that our ancient language habits are fundamentally broken and totally at odds with the modern world. He believed this leads to a state he called unsanity.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, here's our roadmap. First, we're going to look at what he called the language trap. Then, we'll dig into the outdated operating system that he says is causing it, look at the very real costs of this kind of thinking, and finally, get to the solution, a system he called general semantics and the mental toolkit that you can use with it. Now, our main source for all of this is a massive, and I mean monumental, 1933 book called Science and Sanity. It's by Alfred Korzybski, a Polish-American engineer and scholar. And after he saw the absolute devastation of World War I, he really dedicated his entire life to figuring out what he saw as the root cause of all human conflict. Okay, so first up, what Korzybski called the language trap. He argued that there's this problem hiding in plain sight that's literally baked into our language. It distorts how we perceive reality. And he believed the real root of this trap is that all of us are running on some dangerously outdated mental software. He called this our outdated OS, a system of logic we inherited from the ancient world. To put it in today's terms, it's like trying to run the latest AI on a computer from the 1980s. It just doesn't work. And this fundamental mismatch, he argued, comes from a way of thinking that's about 2,300 years old. And here's the core of that mismatch, right here. On the left, you've got the old Aristotelian system. It's a black and white world. It's either-or logic. Something is either good or bad, right or wrong. But on the right, that's the non-Aristotelian system he was pushing for. It's a system that actually reflects reality the way modern science sees it. Dynamic, always changing, and full of infinite shades of gray. And the thing is, he argued this old system is so deeply baked into our culture, into our education, that we don't even recognize it as a system. We just think it's reality. As you can see from this quote, he saw it as a structure of thought that was shaped by historical powers, and that it affects everything from our personal lives to our global politics. So, what's the big deal? I mean, why does any of this actually matter? Well, for Korzybski, the stakes could not have been higher. He saw this deep mismatch between our ancient language and modern reality as the source of just enormous suffering, both for individuals and for society as a whole. The central problem, the core bug in the system, is a mistake he called identification. It's that automatic, totally unconscious reflex where we confuse the word for the thing, the label for the actual person, the menu for the meal. We end up reacting to the symbol, not the reality it's supposed to represent. And what's really fascinating is that Korzybski believed this error, this fundamental flaw in our thinking, was completely and totally ignored. He felt that the experts of his time, psychologists, educators, political leaders, were all missing the boat. He saw it as a massive neurological blind spot in our entire culture. He actually had a pretty dramatic way to make this point in his classroom, to make it unforgettable. He'd be in the middle of a lecture, and then, bam, he'd suddenly slap a student's hand. He'd point out that the other students in the room would flinch, they'd recoil, but their reaction, that was just to the idea of a slap. The student who was actually hit had a completely different experience, a direct nervous system level event. It's a really stark way to show the enormous gap between a symbol and reality itself. And the end result of all this constant confusion is what he termed unsanity. He saw it everywhere, in our personal anxieties, where we react to a label like failure instead of what actually happened. And he saw it on a global scale, arguing that the political horrors of his time in the 1930s and 40s were fueled by people weaponizing these exact same bugs in our language. Okay, so if that's the diagnosis, what's the cure? Korzybski wasn't just a critic. He actually developed a practical, hands-on antidote. He called it general semantics, and he was very, very clear this is not just another abstract philosophy. He saw general semantics as a kind of mental hygiene.
Think of it as a practical training method to literally retrain our brains and nervous systems so we can react more accurately, more sanely to the world as it is, not just how we talk about it. The whole system is really based on making us better at what he called our time-binding capacity. That was his term for the thing that makes us uniquely human, our ability to learn from the past, to build up knowledge, and to pass it on through symbols to the next generation. Animals can't do that. For Korzybski, this is what defined us, and general semantics is a method for making us better time binders. Okay, so this is the crucial part, right? How do we actually do this? How do we retrain our own brains? Korzybski didn't just leave it as a theory. He developed a whole set of simple, practical mental tools you can use every day. So the whole system really rests on these 3 core principles. You can think of them as the basic rules for sanity. First, and this is the most famous one, the map is not the territory. The word is not the thing. Your idea about your job is not your actual job. Second, the map does not represent all of the territory. Any description, any label, no matter how good, always leaves stuff out. And third, the map is self-reflexive, which just means we have thoughts about our thoughts, feelings about our feelings, and so on forever. And this little quote just brilliantly nails that first point. It's a direct challenge to the word is, what he called the is of identity. When you say, this pen is blue, you're identifying the whole object with just one of its characteristics. This statement forces you to remember, whatever you say about a thing, you haven't captured the thing itself. So, to put these ideas into practice, he created these things he called extensional devices. They're basically mental habits that are designed to break that automatic identification reflex. The whole point is to force a conscious pause, a delay between something happening and you reacting to it, so you can think more clearly. And here it is. This is your practical toolkit for sanity. You use indexing to remember that, politician 1 isn't the same as politician 2. You use dating to remind yourself that the economy in 2008 isn't the economy in 2025. You add a mental etc. to your statements to remember you can't say everything. You put abstract words like love in mental quotes to remind yourself it's a label, not a universal fact. And you use hyphens to reconnect things our language splits apart, like the mind-body connection. Korzybski was absolutely convinced that humanity would have to adopt this new way of thinking eventually. Writing this in the 1940s, with World War II fresh in his mind, he saw this mental shift as not just a good idea, but an absolute necessity for our survival. So the big takeaway here is really a message of empowerment. Our language does not have to be our destiny. By becoming aware of these traps and actually using these simple tools, we can fundamentally change how we react to the world. And maybe, just maybe, build a saner one, starting right here in our own heads. And that leaves us with one final thought to take away. In what areas of your own life, your work, your relationships, even how you think about yourself, are you reacting to a simplified, outdated, or just plain wrong mental map, instead of dealing with the complex, always changing territory of reality?